What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and today I am going to talk about Suning. So, Suning just lost to EDG in their last match, and I had somebody in Discord, I think it was Chris Brown, asked me, you know, why do you like Suning? Like, yes, you like their talent, but are they just bad? And I figured I'd make a relatively quick video to kind of explain why I like Suning, but also why I like certain teams and dislike other teams, just more generally. So first, let's talk about Suning the team. So Suning, if you remember, which obviously I didn't mean that in like a condescending way, but like they made it to World Finals. So they're obviously a very capable team. Can teams just lose it? Sure. We see that in other sports, like in the NFL, when one of the teams, if you like lose the Super Bowl, you're generally going to have a pretty bad season the next year. So like with Suning, losing Sword Art could potentially like dismantle their entire team in terms of like being stable, being able to repeat a Worlds run or be competitive in China. So personally, I think that it's unlikely that Sword Art is the reason why this team went from being the best team to being a bad team. Like I don't think that the person in Discord was necessarily saying that they're a bad team now, but like not as good as I think they are. So when 4/5 of the roster stays the same, it's very tough for me to think to myself, oh, this team is so much worse without there being some other gigantic factors like the meta. So one thing we should consider is this a good meta for Suning, and things like that. So let's talk about the players first, and then we'll talk about how the season has gone so far, and then we'll talk about some other stuff. So first up, we have Bin. Bin is a carry top laner, very diverse champion pool, very good at Camille, which is a strong champion right now that he hasn't been playing. In their first game today, and actually, let's get the scoreboards up. In their game today, he played Gnar against Set, and they had a legitimate chance to win this game. So I don't. It's not like I hate the pick or something like that. It's just they lost. So Summer. So lost Gnar, loss. So they lose every Gnar game. No, they don't lose every Gnar game. They lose most of their Gnar matches. But also they've played some pretty good opponents. So losing to Invictus Gaming, even without the Shy, is somewhat reasonable. They should be relatively close in terms of talent. Losing to World Elite. World Elite is a team that most people are very high on long term because they're a young, talented roster. Beating Up is expected. Beating BLG, I think, was a better win than it seems like so far because BLG has had a pretty tough schedule as well so far. And then losing to EDG, like most people think that EDG is a very good team. Like why would Suning losing to a quote unquote very good team make us downgrade Suning? Like that's just not how it works, in my opinion. That's not how I think about like the interactions of teams, even when the results don't go your way. Like losing to a good team shouldn't make you like the losing team less on its own. Maybe there's stuff that you see in the game that changes that, but just as a fast rule that you shouldn't do that. So in the match today, and I ended up watching most of this match because I woke up very hungover from a work thing I was at yesterday. Suning played well in the first game until they threw everything away at that Baron fight. And I don't want to watch the entire Baron fight and like second guess some of like their small decisions that they made in that team fight. But overall, I think it was a bad decision to continuously go for a fight when you had a winning position. Because I think two players from EDG were dead. You could have just gone to the Baron, done the Baron, and you would have been fine. Could you have had the game thrown at that point? Yes, but at least you're making the better decision that potentially loses the game. Like, chasing them down is giving up your Baron opportunity, which is a difficult thing to come by a lot of the time in a close match, which this was a close match. So you can't just dismiss that as like, oh, it was a risky Baron, they shouldn't have done it. If you think that there aren't many other opportunities for you to get a Baron, then yeah, you should risk it because the risk reward is in your favor, in my mind. So yeah, it was a good first game. The second game, I wasn't watching the second game. I went into the office at that point. So you coin flipped one game, you lost the second game. Yes, you got 2-0'd, but it's against a good team from EDG. So there's just not much you can take away from that. In terms of drafting, I think drafting Rumble is fine. Drafting Viego is fine. Drafting Gnar is fine. Varus and Leona, they're all relatively good champions. You can't fault them for their draft here, in my opinion. They got into a match against a set in a top lane and against a Volibear in the jungle. This is a game that I think they should win, and they were in a position to win. It's just they didn't win. Like, that's a negative thing, but it's not going to change my opinion of them. Then, in the second game, we see Akali. Akali's a very strong champion right now. Giving away Akali is not a great idea, especially when you... maybe they didn't want to ban Akali because they could have played it. Angel does play Akali. But they give away Gwen, which is thought of as a very strong pick right now. They thought that they had a counter in Jax. So that's something that you could... That's something they could have wanted to happen. Did it work in their favor? No. But maybe there's something about the Jax-Gwen matchup that is very good for Bin, who is a very good Jax player, very good Jax, Camille. I'm sure he plays Gwen well. We haven't seen it yet. And then in the jungle, you have Hecarim against SFM. This is the kind of thing where it's like a tough matchup to be on the SFM side because Hecarim has the opportunity to overwhelm the other team through tankiness. So maybe that's a problem. Maybe this Viego was like a flex pick, or at least they were thinking of it as a flex pick. They probably took Ezreal Karma very fast. They probably went Ezreal Karma and then Viego and then solo lanes like LeBlanc and then Jax last. And like I said, I'm not going to go through the whole VOD and everything like that. So that's that. So the drafting was fine against EDG. A lot of the decision making was fine in that first game until they had that one bad decision around the Baron, which can lose you a game, and that happens to a lot of different teams. So you don't want to disproportionately change your opinion on Suning from like one bad decision that did ultimately lose them a game. So that's fine from today's match. Let's take a look at some of their other matches. We already kind of did, but IG is a good team, World Elite's a good team, BLG is a good team, EDG is a good team. Up is bad, so that's fine. Let's take a look at the rest of their schedule to see where some other good spots are going to be for... Because this is the stuff that you should do, like, when you know that there are questions about a team like Suning, you should see which spots you're going to consider playing them again. So, Suning against LGD, going into the season, I'm sure that Suning would have been the favorite in this match. When this line gets posted, LGD will be listed as the favorite. I'm fairly certain about that. So that's a spot where you instantly want to play Suning on DraftKings, and you want to pick Suning to win the match with the sportsbook. Suning against RNG. Very tough matchup, but Suning is a team that should be able to compete with RNG. RNG has looked pretty shaky against a lot of other teams. They lost to LNG, who's a pretty good team. They lost to OMG, who's actually been pretty impressive, but I'm not totally convinced. And RNG will have two other opportunities to have good wins. So if they beat FPX, very good win. If they beat TES, very good win, which is going to make everybody buy into RNG is just so much better than Suning. Suning doesn't have a chance. Suning against OMG, I'll take Suning. Suning against Top Esports, I have a tough time picking that, but it could be good for DraftKings. Suning beating Rogue Warriors, everybody's going to be on that. Suning against JDG, another very tough spot. Suning against LNG, I think that's an interesting one where you could potentially pick Suning, especially if LNG continues to play well up through this point. Suning against FPX is pretty tough. Suning against V5, I'd happily play Suning. Suning against Rare Atom, I'd happily play Suning. Suning against TT, I'd happily play Suning. So that's just that. I know that I'm much more consistent. Maybe consistent's not the right word. I'm much more willing to stick with a team that I believe in their talent. So I do believe in their talent. I do think they've had a tough schedule. I do think their drafting is okay. I understand why people are frustrated because they've had what looks to be some bad performances. If you're box score watching, essentially, because League of Legends is a tough game to lose once you give away a large gold lead. And when they lost that Baron fight, it basically gave the other team Baron. It basically gave the other team Mountain Soul, and now you're just fighting an uphill battle. So that's really all I wanted to get off my chest. I guess we could talk about the meta. Overall, I think the meta is good for Suning. The only question mark is I still think Angel and I guess On potentially, but I think Bin is a championship level top laner. I think that S of M is probably a championship level jungler. He's not a difference maker jungler, but he's good enough to be on a championship team, I think. Angel is too. Angel's good enough. But again, not necessarily a difference maker, which is a big problem in my opinion. And then Huanfeng is very, very good. Like you can build a team around Huanfeng and win a championship, I think. And then On is still very early on in their career, so tough to say. But that's basically it. So I think I hit all the bases. I think that the meta is in a good spot for them right now, and I think that it will only get better as long as On can play like that Sword Art role of protecting hyper carries, which will be super important as time goes on. But that's all I've got for you in this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.